Hello everyone, I wish you peace and happiness. Are you all healthy? Today, I will continue to tell you about the difficult, scarce and challenging days of Huyen and her mother. To quietly return to Huyen and Appo's small house. As he entered, he saw Pippi still lying and waiting in the corner, with its hind legs weak and unable to stand up on its own. De went to the water basin, scooped a bowl of clean water, and placed it in front of Pippi. The thirsty dog slowly lowered its head and drank each sip. De looked at Pippi for a moment, then poured porridge into Pippi and Appo's small bowl and placed it in front of Pippi. Pippi, smelling the porridge, ate it little by little. De sat beside it, gently stroking its head and softly said, "Eat up, Pippi. Be good at home. I have to go back to the hospital with Huyen and Appo's mother and child." After saying that, De stood up, looked at the small house once more, and then stepped outside. He returned to his house. I went to the hole in the roof tiles, where he had been storing his savings all this time. He opened his bag, took out all the money, and placed it on the table. I sat down, quietly counting each banknote. The amount wasn't in Appo's too much. He sat motionless for a long time, his eyes looking down at the few coins in front of him. In his mind, he saw Huyen lying on the hospital bed, Micah sitting beside her mother with a worried face. I sighed, clutching the banknotes tightly. He knew this money was all he had saved, but at this moment he had no other choice. I looked up towards the door, my eyes becoming determined. Money can be earned again, but Huyen's illness cannot wait. He gathered all the money carefully into his shirt pocket. I stood up, locked the house door, and hurried back to the hospital. Outside, the village road was still silent, but in his heart there was only one thing: to cure Huyen. The doctor handed a hospital bill and gently said, and quote, "You need to pay the fee." End quote. De took it, bowed his head, and looked at each number on the paper. He stood silently for a long time, his eyes gradually becoming heavy with worry. De reached into his shirt pocket, took out all the little money he had left, and placed it in his palm, slowly counting each crumpled bill. After counting repeatedly, he realized that the amount was no longer enough, completely insufficient to cover Huyen and Appo's hospital fee. De stood still, his head bowed, feeling overwhelmed. He thought hard but didn't in Appo's know how to manage. Glancing at the bill in his hand and then at the small amount of money before him, his eyes flickered with worry and helplessness. After a moment of reflection, De sighed softly, carefully folded the bill and slipped it into his pocket. He quietly returned to the hospital room. As I approached the hospital room door, I quickly put the invoice deep into my shirt pocket, trying to hide the worry on my face. Seeing Huyen lying on the bed with Micah, I quickly smiled brightly, as if nothing had happened. I pulled a chair over and sat beside the bed, gently asking about the mother and daughter. I looked at Huyen and said, "You two stay here, okay? I'll go home to feed Pippi, grab some things and then come back." After saying that, I forced a smile to reassure Huyen. I turned and hurried toward the door. My figure gradually disappeared behind the hospital corridor, carrying the hospital bill and the heavy worry I didn't want Huyen to know in my shirt pocket. I went outside to get the motorbike and quickly headed back home. After a long journey, Huyen's small house gradually appeared before my eyes. I slowed down, stopped outside, holding a warm bowl of porridge. I followed the narrow path through the garden and entered the house. As soon as I entered the house, I heard Pippi softly whimpering inside. Seeing me, Pippi happily wagged its tail, trying to crawl quickly to greet me. Its hind legs were injured and unable to walk normally, so Pippi had to use its front legs to drag its body inch by inch across the floor. I opened the door wide and sat down beside Pippi, gently stroking its head. Pippi lay close to my feet, its tail still wagging constantly as if it had been waiting for me to return for a long time. I smiled softly, stood up and poured a bowl of clean water, placing it in front of Pippi. Then I took the bowl of porridge I had just brought, carefully poured the porridge into a bowl, and set it down in front of it. Pippi immediately lowered its head and ate the porridge bite by bite. I sat quietly beside it, watching as it ate, my hand still gently stroking its fur. In the small house with Huyen and Micah absent, only the soft sound of Pippi eating echoed, making my heart feel even heavier. In the hospital room, Micah saw her mother move slightly and quickly stood up. She held a small cup, poured a little water, and then carefully brought the cup to her mother and Appo's bedside. Micah carefully handed the cup of water to her mother and softly said, end quote, "Mom, please drink some water." End quote. Huyen weakly reached out and took the cup. Seeing her obedient little daughter taking care of her, she gently smiled, her eyes showing a touch of warmth. Micah sat close beside her, watching her mother drink each sip of water before calmly placing the cup down. De gently picked up Pippi, laying her neatly on the mat in the corner of the house. He brought a bowl of water and a bowl of porridge and placed them in front of Pippi, then sat down to stroke her head. De softly said, end quote, "Be good at home, Pippi." End quote. Pippi looked up at him, her tail gently wagging as if understanding his words. De stood up, looked at Pippi for a moment, then carefully closed the door. He stepped outside, got on his motorbike and began the long journey back home. Micah climbed onto the bed and reached out her small hand to feel her mother and Appo's forehead. As soon as she touched it, she was startled to feel Huyen and Appo's forehead burning hot. Her mother was running a high fever. Micah looked at her mother worriedly for a moment, then quickly grabbed a small towel, ran to the bathroom. She turned on the tap, soaked the towel, and then squeezed it tightly with her small hands. Micah took the towel and ran back to the hospital room, carefully folded it, and gently placed it on her mother and Appo's forehead. She sat close to the bed, her eyes never leaving Huyen, occasionally reaching out to touch her mother and Appo's forehead to see if her fever had subsided. In the quiet hospital room, the young girl only knew how to care for her sick mother in the simplest way she could. After a long journey, the motorcycle slowly stopped in front of the house gate. De turned off the lock, got off the bike and then opened the old gate. He guided the bike inside, then started the engine and drove slowly along the small path lined with lush cornfields. The corn leaves gently swayed in the wind, brushing lightly against both sides of the road. When he reached the porch, De turned off the engine, parked the bike and stepped onto the porch. He took out the key to open the door, and the creaking wooden door swung open. De entered the house, quietly looking around the familiar home after a long, tiring day. De stood silently in the house, looking up at the corner near the ceiling where there was a small hole through which he had been hiding his savings all along. He stood thinking for a moment, then pulled the old plastic chair over. De carefully climbed onto the chair, reached into the corner of the hole, fumbled for a while, and then took out the old cloth bag. He tightly embraced the money bag in his hands, stepped down from the chair. De sat on the old bench, placed the money bag on his lap, and silently looked at it, his heart heavy with thoughts. De looked up at the roof, where a large tile had long been broken, revealing a gap through which rainwater would leak into the house whenever it rained. This was the money he had saved and scrimped for so long, intended for repairing the roof. De lowered his gaze to the money bag in his hand and remained silent for a long time. He felt a twinge of regret, but then the image of Huyen lying on the hospital bed appeared in his mind. He clenched the money bag tightly and sighed softly. At this moment, saving Huyen was the most important thing. The roof could be repaired later, but Huyen's health and life could not wait. De sat quietly for a moment in the empty house, his eyes still fixed on the empty bed. He bent down, took the small amount of money in his hand, and carefully counted each bill. The worn-out coins were smoothed out and checked thoroughly, but the remaining amount was not much. De sighed softly, feeling worried because there were still many expenses to cover for Huyen and Micah. He folded the money neatly, carefully put it into his shirt pocket and stood up. De looked around the house one last time, as if afraid he might forget something. He walked to the door, closed it carefully and checked the lock once more. Without hesitation, De hurriedly left the house, quickly returning to the hospital where Huyen and Micah were still waiting for him. Micah sat beside the hospital bed, her small hands gently massaging her mother and Apo's feet. Huyen remained lying still, her face tired, her eyes closed from the fever. Micah, while massaging, looked up at her mother with a worried expression. Occasionally, she reached out to touch her mother and Apo's foot as if to be sure she was still there. The hospital room was quiet, only the soft breathing of Huyen and Micah and Apo's small hands patiently massaging her mother. After a long journey, De finally arrived at the hospital gate. He stopped the car, turned off the engine and hurriedly got out. Without time to rest, De quickly entered the hospital, heading straight to the doctor and Apo's on-call room. His face showed clear worry, and in his heart, he only hoped that Huyen and Micah were safe. De took the money out of his shirt pocket, placed it on the table, and carefully counted each bill. He checked it thoroughly, then bundled the money into a neat stack and handed it to the doctor to pay a large amount of Huyen and Apo's hospital fees. Seeing his savings diminish, De couldn't and Apo's help but feel a pang of sadness, but thinking about Huyen and Apo's need for treatment, he had no hesitation. After making the payment, De put the remaining money into his shirt pocket and hurried back to the hospital room. As soon as I entered the hospital room, I saw Micah sitting beside my mother and Apo's bed. Seeing me return, she immediately stood up and hurriedly ran to hold my hand. Micah and Apo's face was full of worry and her voice trembled. "Brother Da, my mother has a fever." Hearing this, I was instantly panicked and quickly approached the bed. I reached out to feel Huyen and Apo's forehead, sensing the heat emanating from it, which made me even more anxious. I hurriedly ran to the nurse and Apo's station, and as soon as I arrived, I called out to the doctor, "Doctor, the patient has a fever. Please come and check her." Hearing my voice, the doctor immediately stood up, grabbed the necessary tools, and quickly followed me back to the hospital room. I walked very quickly, constantly looking back, feeling anxious for Huyen. Upon arrival, the doctor immediately approached the bed to check her condition. After taking her temperature, the doctor noticed that Huyen had a high fever. The doctor quickly prepared the equipment, found a vein, and gently inserted the needle into Huyen and Apo's arm. Once the needle was secured, the doctor connected the foreline and began administering fluids to her. De stood beside her, his eyes fixed on Huyen, feeling anxious and worried. Micah also sat close to the bed, silently watching her mother, her small hands still holding Huyen and Apo's as if to give her strength. De pulled the chair to sit beside the bed, gently holding Huyen and Apo's hand. In the high fever and delirium, painful memories from the past suddenly flooded back. Huyen seemed to relive the moment when she and Micah were coldly expelled from the house by her mother-in-law and her ex-husband, the two of them only able to hold each other amidst shame and despair. Then the image of the ex-husband coming to take Micah away clearly appeared in her mind, causing Huyen to panic and struggle in her fever. "Micah. Where is Micah? Micah?" Huyen kept calling her child, her voice weak but full of fear. Tears streamed down her face, which was flushed from the fever. De gently squeezed her hand, trying to reassure her. "Micah is here, the little girl is still with me. Huyen, rest assured, no one is taking Micah anywhere." But Huyen remained in her delirium, continuously calling Micah and Apo's name as if just a moment and Apo's delay would cause her to lose her only child again. After receiving an 4 drip for a while, Huyen and Apo's fever gradually subsided. She slowly opened her eyes, still appearing tired but more alert. As soon as she woke up, Huyen immediately grasped Micah and Apo's hand tightly, pulling her daughter closer as if afraid of losing her again. Micah also hugged her mother, happily relieved to see her awake. Seeing that Huyen had regained consciousness, De let out a relieved sigh. He approached and gently lifted Micah, placing the girl upright on the chair beside the bed, then softly said, "You two rest here. I and Appos, I'll go outside to buy something to eat. I and Appos, I'll be back soon." After saying that, De looked at Huyen and Micah one more time before confidently leaving the hospital room. To return to the hospital room with a bag of oranges in hand. He gently placed the bag on the small table beside the bed, then sat down next to Huyen. De peeled each orange, carefully separated the segments, and fed them to Huyen. She was still weak, but she gradually ate the segments that De offered. Afterwards, De took an orange and handed it to Micah. The girl happily took it and ran to sit on a chair outside the corridor to eat. In the hospital room, De continued to sit quietly beside Huyen, caring for her, occasionally glancing outside and seeing Micah obediently sitting alone on a small chair, eating her orange. The doctor entered the hospital room, checked Huyen and Appos' condition and gently removed the 4-needle from her arm. The doctor gave a few more instructions and then left the room. De pulled a chair closer to the bed, sat down beside her, and tightly held Huyen and Appos' hand. Looking at her pale, tired face, he softly encouraged her and "Try to get well soon. Your mother and I still have to go home, and Pippi at home is still waiting for both of us." Huyen nodded softly, her weak hand gently squeezing De and Appos', her eyes shining with emotion. She thanked him. De stepped outside, walked to the long bench in the corridor and sat down. He quietly took out his shirt pocket, counted the remaining money on him once more. After gathering all the money to pay the hospital fees and buy medicine for Huyen, now he only had 10,000 dong left in his pocket. De sat quietly for a long time, his eyes looking down at the crumpled bill in his hand, feeling heavy-hearted. He didn't Appos' know how he would manage in the days to come, but at this moment, he only wished Huyen would recover. De sighed, carefully folded the bill and put it into his shirt pocket. He stood up and returned to the hospital room. Seeing Micah sitting nearby, De poured a glass of water and handed it to the girl to drink. Then he poured another glass, approached Huyen and Appos' bed. De gently helped Huyen sit up, supporting her back with one hand and bringing the glass of water close to her mouth with the other. "Drink a little water." Huyen nodded softly and slowly sipped each glass of water with De and Appos' attentive care. De looked at Huyen and gently advised, "You and your mother stay at the hospital. I and Appos' I'll go home for a bit and come back later." After speaking, he approached Micah, bent down and lifted her onto the chair beside the bed. De gently stroked Micah and Appos' head and instructed, "Be good here, take care of your mother and Don and Appos' run away." Micah obediently nodded. De turned to look at Huyen one more time, seeing her lying peacefully on the hospital bed. He opened the small cabinet beside her, took the bag of Huyen and Appos' dirty clothes that had been gathered and walked out of the room. The door closed behind him, leaving the mother and daughter in the quiet room. De was carrying Huyen and Appos' dirty clothes bag as he walked past the duty room. He stopped at the door, entered and said to the doctor, "Please keep an eye on Huyen for me. I have some matters to attend to at home and will come back later." The doctor nodded gently and replied, "You can rest assured that we will monitor Huyen and Appos' condition here." De bowed his head to thank the doctor, then turned and walked out. He hurried down the corridor out of the hospital door, still worried about the mother and child. His figure gradually disappeared behind the hospital gate. In the vast rice fields, farmers are diligently harvesting rice. Some hold sickles, others bundle the rice stalks, and the sound of sickles hitting the rice stems blends with their conversations, creating a lively working scene. De wades through the flooded field, water reaching his knees, slowly approaching the landowner and politely asking for a job. Seeing that Da is honest, healthy and hard-working. The landowner nods in agreement. De says nothing more and immediately gets to work. He bends over in the water-filled field, one hand holding the bundles of rice, the other wielding a sickle, skillfully cutting each stalk close to the ground. After a while, De gathers the harvested rice stalks to one side and continues moving forward. Sweat mixes with the water on his forehead, but he still works tirelessly, hoping to earn some money to support Huyen and Micah. Micah sat beside the bed, her small hands gently squeezing her mother and Apo's hand. Huyen lay still, her face still pale, occasionally frowning slightly from exhaustion. Suddenly, continuous coughing fits caused her to shiver. Micah quickly looked up at her mother, her small hands still tightly holding Huyen and Apo's and asked anxiously, "Is Mom okay?" Huyen tried to reassure her daughter, but the coughing still persisted. Micah sat close to the bed, quietly caring for her mother and waiting for Da to return. After a long day of diligently harvesting rice, the rice plants had been gathered by Da into large piles on the field. The older brother was covered in mud, his clothes soaked because he had been working in the water for hours without rest. Da bent down, took 2 long sturdy rice leaves, and twisted them together into a natural rope. He used this rope to tightly tie each bundle of rice into neat sheaves. After tying each bundle, Da stood up, bent down to carry the sheaf on his shoulder, and waded across the field to the gathering point. In this way, he repeatedly returned to the field, collecting each bundle and carrying it away. His shoulders were heavy, but his mind was only focused on the wages he was about to receive to go back and take care of Huyen and Micah. After carrying all the rice from the field to the collection point, Da and the other young men continued with their work. Each bundle of rice was stacked into large piles, waiting to be taken to the rice mill. Everyone took turns carrying each bundle on their shoulders, with some going ahead and others following behind. Da quickly grabbed a large bundle of rice, pressing it firmly on his shoulder, and took steps toward the mill. The distance was not too far, but the heavy bundles made everyone exhausted. Sweat soaked through their shirts, yet no one complained. Everyone was diligently working to finish the day and Apo's work quickly. Da placed the bundle beside the mill, wiped the sweat from his forehead, and then turned to carry another bundle. When the bundles of rice are sequentially fed into the grinder, the machine and Apo's noise rings steadily across the field. The golden rice grains pour down from the machine into a large basin below. Da stands beside, with both hands holding the opening of the sack to let another man carry the sack of rice and pour it in. Before long the sack is full. Da quickly gathers the opening, tightly ties it with a string, then bends down to carry it on his shoulder, placing it neatly aside. After setting the rice sack down, he returns to his original position, continuing to open the sack and wait for others to pour rice in. The work repeats endlessly. Although his shoulders are exhausted, his hands are calloused, and sweat soaks his shirt back. Da still strives to work because he knows that each completed sack of rice will earn him money to support Huyen and Micah. Seeing the landowner looking exhausted after a long day of work, Da immediately stepped beside him. He gently said, "Take a break for a while, let me do this part." Without waiting for the landowner to refuse, Da quickly swapped places with him, taking on the heavier task. The landowner sat down to rest, watching Da continue the work with admiration. Despite working since morning, with sweat and fatigue all over him, Da did not stop. He bent down to continue harvesting rice, taking the place of the landowner, working swiftly beside the milling machine. In Da and Apo's mind there was only one thought: to try his best to earn more money, because Huyen and Micah were still waiting for him to return. After the work was finished, everyone took turns to rest. The landowner approached Da, holding the payment in his hand, and handed it to him. Da happily accepted it, bowed his head to thank the landowner for giving him a day of work. He carefully put the money into his shirt pocket, feeling somewhat relieved thinking about Huyen and Micah being in the hospital. Not lingering for long, De quickly turned and walked away, stepping briskly towards his house. He wanted to quickly return to handle his work, and then come back to take care of his mother and daughter. Just arrived home, De hurriedly opened the door and stepped inside. After a long day working in the fields, his clothes were stained with mud and soaked with sweat. He quickly went to the bathroom, washed up thoroughly, and changed into another outfit. Once finished, De didn't and Appos have time to rest. Thinking that Huyen and Micah were still waiting for him at the hospital, he hurriedly left the house and quickly returned to the hospital with Huyen and Micah. On his way hurriedly to the hospital, De passed by a casual eatery. Thinking that Huyen and Micah might also be hungry, he immediately stopped in front of the shop, went in and bought a takeout meal. After receiving the meal, De took out the money to pay the owner and thanked her. He carefully held the lunchbox in his hand, quickly left the shop, and continued heading toward the hospital. In his heart, he only wished to return soon to be with Huyen and her 2 children. The doctor entered the hospital room, took the prepared medicine, and brought it to Huyen and Appos' bedside. Then, the doctor poured a glass of water and handed the medicine to her. Take your medicine, please. Huyen gently sat up, accepted the medicine, and drank it with sips of water. After finishing, she placed the glass down, looked at the doctor with gratitude, and softly said, "Thank you, doctor." The doctor smiled, advised Huyen to rest and recover quickly, and continued to monitor her condition. As soon as De stepped into the hospital room, he was still holding the meal he had just bought. Seeing De, Micah immediately ran over, hugging him tightly as if she had been waiting for a long time. De smiled, bent down to pick up Micah, and then entered the room with her. He gently placed Micah down beside the bed, then set the lunchbox on the small table. De looked over at Huyen, who was still lying resting on the hospital bed, and softly inquired about the condition of the mother and child. De approached the bed, gently placing his hand on Huyen and Appos' forehead. Seeing that her forehead was cooler, he let out a small breath of relief, feeling somewhat reassured. Then De opened the lunchbox he had just bought, took a small plastic cup, scooped some rice and meat into it, and handed it to Micah. He carried her to the next bed, sat her down, and handed her the cup of rice. Micah took it, eating and chewing happily. Perhaps because she had been hungry for a long time, she ate very quickly, finishing every piece of rice. De sat beside her watching her eat, and seeing her enjoy her meal, he also smiled, feeling at ease. After setting aside the rice portion for Huyen, De placed the bowl on the table and walked over to the bed. He gently adjusted the backrest so Huyen could sit up more comfortably. De helped her sit upright, added a pillow behind her back, and then picked up the rice portion. He scooped small bites, brought them to her mouth, and patiently fed her little by little. Since Huyen was still weak, she ate very slowly. De didn't and Appos' rush her, only quietly sitting beside her, waiting for her to swallow before scooping another bite. The hospital room was quiet, and Micah, on the adjacent bed, was also obediently eating her meal. Huyen had just taken a few bites of rice when she gently looked at De and weakly asked, "Where did you go this afternoon that took so long?" De hesitated for a moment, then quickly smiled, avoiding Huyen and Appos' gaze. He softly replied, "I just went out for a little while, Don and Appos' worry." After saying that, De continued to scoop rice and feed Huyen each piece. He didn't and Appos' dare tell her that this afternoon he had been working in the fields, harvesting rice and carrying heavy bags of rice to earn money. He was afraid that if Huyen found out, she would worry and feel guilty, especially since her health was still weak. De just wanted her to rest and recover, while he would bear the hardships outside himself. Huyen gently shook her head, placed the spoon down and looked at De, softly saying, "I and Appos' am full. You should go eat." My mother and I have caused you too much trouble. End quote. Thank you, I appreciate it. De immediately smiled and shook his head. He gently said, end quote, Don and Apos T say that. Whatever I can do to help, just let me help. My mother and I want and Apos T trouble you, end quote. Huyen lay quietly on the bed, looking at him, feeling both guilty and touched by what De had done for her and her mother. De approached the bed, gently adjusted the backrest so Huyen could lie down slowly. He propped a pillow behind her head to make her comfortable. Then De took the medicine prescribed by the doctor, poured a glass of water, and brought it to the bedside. He gently helped Huyen sit up a little, gave her the medicine to take, and then brought the glass of water close to her mouth. Huyen drank small sips, then lay back down to rest. De sat down beside the small table, took out the remaining rice to eat. A simple meal shared among 3 people, not much left, but for De at this moment it was enough. Looking at Huyen resting on the bed, then glancing at Micah who was full and obediently sitting beside her, De couldn't and Apos T help but smile. He had worked hard all day, but he didn't and Apos T feel any regret. On the contrary, De felt happy because he had been able to help Huyen get through the most difficult days. As long as the mother and child were safe, the hardships he endured no longer mattered. After finishing his meal, De tidied up the lunchbox and set it aside, then approached Huyen and Apos' bed. Seeing that she was still weak, he gently helped her sit up, wrapping one arm around her to support her as she stood up. De slowly guided Huyen to the bathroom, carefully taking each step so she wouldn't Apos T fall. Once done, De helped Huyen back to the hospital room. He supported her to sit on the bed, gently lifted her legs onto the bed, and then slowly helped her lie down. De adjusted the pillow behind her head, straightened the blanket, and sat beside her, watching Huyen rest. Huyen looked at him softly, feeling both grateful and touched by De and Apos' attentive care. Huyen was lying on the bed, glancing around the room before softly asking De, end quote, where is Micah, brother? End quote. De looked towards the door, saw that the bed beside was empty, and smiled reassuringly, end quote. Micah probably went out to play with her friends. You just rest here, I and Apos I'll go find her. End quote. Saying that, De stood up and quickly left the hospital room. De found Micah and gently carried her back to the hospital bed. He approached the bed, carefully laid Micah down next to Huyen. Micah obediently lay close to her mother, while Huyen reached out to hold her daughter in her arms. De sat down beside them, feeling more at ease seeing Huyen and Micah together. When Huyen and Micah fell asleep, the hospital room gradually became quiet. De still sat beside the bed, gently holding Huyen and Apos' hand as if to ensure that she was still safe. Watching the mother and daughter sleep soundly, he let out a soft sigh after a long, exhausting day. After a while, De and Apos' eyes also began to grow heavy. He still did not let go of Huyen and Apos' hand, only slowly resting his head on the edge of the bed before falling asleep. In the small hospital room, the 3 of them quietly stayed together, temporarily forgetting the hardships of difficult days. If everyone loves Huyen and Micah and Apos' mother, please subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and leave a word of encouragement for the 2 of them to see the next developments. Every follow and every loving comment from everyone will be a source of comfort and strength to help Huyen get through difficult times. Thank you all very much.